All right, what's up, y'all? I think we are now live. Again, we're switching over to YouTube. We had to do this one other time. For whatever reason, Zoom and Facebook Live do not always cooperate with each other. So we will do this on YouTube, at least for now. And we'll probably repost the video on Facebook later on. Again, I'm Wes Mitchell, along with Chris Clark. And all right, what's up, y'all? I think we'll give everybody live. A chance to sort of get in here and fill in, and I got to send in these links. But Chris, real quick before we get into football, man, first of all, have you gotten another haircut? And second of all, do we have some new shows on Netflix, or are we just hanging out with the same stuff?
Well, the haircut should have been pretty obvious to you. The answer is no. It's pretty bushy today. And I did have to shave because the quarantine beard or whatever was getting a little crazy. And so I just started all over, and we'll let it grow out again. And, so next week I'll have a little bit of the quarantine beard. No haircut. We'll see, later on what happens. As for the shows, man, so one thing did happen. Homeland finished up, and I'm not going to spoil it for you because I know you're watching it and you're way, way behind. But there are 8 seasons of Homeland. I started watching it years ago. And so this was the series finale, was last Sunday. And I'm going to have a hard time. I might get emotional about it if I start talking about it. But it was so good. I was actually texting back and forth with Kev Roche about it Monday morning. We gave each other some time to make sure we had watched it. And it was awesome. So I'm still rolling through Ozark. I'm on season 2, about halfway through that. That's a really good one. And I'm doing a little bit of Better Call Saul. So once I finish up, I think there's 3 seasons of Ozark. I'm going to hit Better Call Saul, hit a few seasons of that, and then we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, I just sort of got on this Homeland train, so to speak. And but I've been powering through it, man. So it won't be long before I'll be done. And it's a Showtime show. So do y'all have Showtime?
No, we have right now. So I used to have it, and I just did a free trial for the last season here to catch up on it because I'm thinking about getting it again. But now that they don't have Homeland, they got some other good shows on there, from my understanding. But Ray Donovan, I think, is on there, right, and Billions and some other ones. But so right now I'm just doing the free trial of it.
I got you. Yeah, and the thing is, a bunch of these networks and services are putting all their stuff on other services right now. So if you want to get into Homeland, it's on Hulu right now. So I've been watching it on Hulu with no commercials, and they have there's 8 seasons, I think, right? The most recent one was 8. So 7 of the 8 are on Hulu with no commercials or anything. And as long as you have Hulu, you get to watch it. So then you can do that, and then you can do the free trial on Showtime to watch the final season. So you're in pretty good shape. Been a pretty interesting week since we talked South Carolina. I guess we talked on Saturday as the draft was going on, but real quick while I'm putting out these final links before we get into the new stuff, Chris, what were your just overarching thoughts on the draft for South Carolina?
Well, I thought really it went about as expected. I think there was one thing I'll get to in a second that was really surprising, but we figured Javon Kinlaw, just, from all the buzz around him and from what we heard, would probably be a top 15 pick. And that's what happened. He went 14. Brian Edwards was thought of. It was thought that second round would be probably the absolute highest he would go, and probably later second round at that. And so, he ended up going, I think, 81st overall, which was in the 3rd round. Good spot for him. DJ Wanham, I think, was maybe a little bit more of a question mark as far as he was thought of as a mid to late round guy, and he ended up going fairly early, 4th round to the Vikings, which is really good for him. And then TJ Brunson, maybe, again, was another question whether or not he'd get drafted. If he was, thought it'd be probably a 7th round pick, and that's what he was. So a lot of that played out like we thought. Joe Charlton not getting picked up as a very priority free agent was surprising to me. And Wes, my understanding on that is just, a lot of people had Charlton as their third or fourth ranked punter. Apparently, Braden Mann from A&M was one, and he got drafted. Sterling Hoffrichter from I think Syracuse got drafted. And my understanding is that with very limited roster spots for specialists and a limited roster overall in the NFL, your spots for punter are not plentiful. It's not like signing a defensive back or something. And so Charlton, I think, he got a little bit caught up in a numbers game where, he's the third or fourth guy on some people's boards, which is surprising to me. I thought he might have been the best or the second best punter in the country. So unfortunate for him, but I think at some point he'll get a shot and have a chance to stick somewhere. But other than that, I thought that the draft played out pretty well for the Gamecocks overall, and not really surprising in terms of, a lot of the movements. No big shocks for them, really.
Yeah, I thought TJ Brunson sneaking in there, I was very happy for him on a personal level. And, he was the one guy I did, because he didn't get invited to the combine. So I sort of thought that was a sign that maybe some of the other fringe draft guys like a Rico Daddle was maybe ahead of TJ Brunson on these draft boards. And so TJ sneaks in. I was glad to see that, him getting that opportunity, and we'll see what he can do with the Giants. And then you had, of course, 5 guys go the undrafted free agent route. I still think that Charlton will get a chance somewhere. We'll see where that ends up being. You don't need a punter until you need a punter. So I would think at some point, it pops up where he gets an opportunity. The big news today, though, South Carolina getting a commitment from Trenilyas Tatum, a 4-star linebacker, Jonesboro, Georgia, a kid that is a top 250 player in the country, according to Rivals, 4-star prospect, one of the best sort of true inside linebacker type kids, and a really nice pickup for South Carolina. Chris, we'll go into the film here in a second, but big picture, your thoughts on the pickup of Tatum.
Well, I actually spoke this morning with a high school coach in Georgia whose team played against Tatum last season, and said, give me your thoughts from a coaching perspective. And he had a couple main thoughts. One of them was that he's still a little bit raw. I'll go into why. That's not a negative at all. Still a little bit raw, but the term he used was grown man, just in terms of size and his physical ability, his physical traits. The reason I think Coach described him as still a little bit raw is, if you look at his film, Wes, he's someone that you're looking at almost exclusively playing in the box, run game. And I told the coach, I said, I don't really get a great feel for what he can do in space. And he said, well, a lot of that's just related to their scheme. They're scheming to stop the run. That's how they use him. He's not asked to cover a lot in space. So when Tatum gets to college, when he gets to South Carolina, that'll be an adjustment for him. But the good news is he has, from an instinct standpoint, football IQ, from a physical trait standpoint, he's got the ability to do it. But I think he's an impressive guy on film. The size checks out. He's very comfortable playing in the box, blitzing, whether it's off the edge, run blitzing, shooting gaps. He's a sure tackler. So I think there's a lot to like about Tatum with this pickup.
Yeah, and, let's go big picture for a second, Chris. I mean, dude, you talk about back-to-back, getting a guy like Bryce Still, who, we talked about this just recently, how good-looking of a prospect as this kid is, and how he's a guy that just fits the mold of what you're looking for in a linebacker in today's college football game. I look at it, and to me, these two guys pair together very nicely. Like you're talking about, Trenilyas may be more of that inside the box, blitzing, hold up against the run type linebacker. And then you have a guy like Bryce Still, who is a former safety, still in some ways views himself as like a safety in a linebacker's body as far as his coverage ability. And, I'm thinking if you were going to sort of scheme up a defense and maybe use one guy to his skill set and use the other to his skill set, to me, this fits well, where if down the road, obviously South Carolina has linebackers already in the pipe, but down the road, when these two guys are maybe juniors and potentially starting alongside each other, I think they fit in well. I don't think South Carolina's done at linebacker yet, but even if these were your two guys in the class, I think they'll take one or two more. But if these were your two guys, you'd actually, I believe, feel pretty good, especially about throwing those guys on top of a Motaba, who I think we're all very high on from the last class.
Yeah, I mean Motaba and Gilbert. I almost always forget about Gilbert Edmond from the last class just because he was a signing day a signing day flip, and he was also a guy that sort of unique in that he was sort of thought of as a rush in, but South Carolina wants to at least give him a look, inside or as a micro will type player. So Kaba, I mean, we've heard rave reviews about him. They loved him during recruiting. He's checked all the boxes since he's gotten on campus with what he's been able to do, in the course of recovering and getting 100% from that knee injury before things got shut down as an early enrollee. But, a nice, smaller, but nice class for them last year. And these two guys, you're right. I mean, they got some unique sort of strengths, with Steele being someone who could have played safety, had that big safety looking type body, and Tatum, who looks like a guy who can continue to fill out, continue to get bigger. What is he listed at? 6'2", I think 210 West, 215. Certainly can get bigger and is really comfortable, playing in the box. I think they've got a couple guys with some versatility, and certainly guys that are talented and productive at the high school level, and they have physical traits that can carry over to the SEC, which is what you want in a prospect.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody that's joining us now live. If you're listening on our other platforms later on, please, give us a follow on Facebook, give us a subscription on YouTube, and just so you can watch these live when we do them. Of course, we do post them later on. Let's see, we got one chatter in there right now. Barwick, appreciate you joining. Anybody else, put your questions. And if you're watching this on the embed, just click through and watch it directly on YouTube. And then you can put your questions there in the little chat, and we will get to them as we go. But I think for South Carolina, a big commit, it was a little bit of a surprise. I mean, when Chad Simmons called me earlier this week and was like, Trenilyas Tatum's about to commit to South Carolina, I was like, really? It's a little bit of a surprise to me. I know Georgia Tech was in a position where I think they were probably the early leader. They got in on him first, Chris. Were able to really just sort of build some familiarity there, I think, with him and the program. But the sense is to me that, one, even though he went to Georgia Tech many times, he just didn't quite get the vibe there that he got at South Carolina. He took a visit the first weekend of February. That I saw you talked to him right after that visit, Chris, but that visit ended up being ridiculous for South Carolina, I think, as far as making a big move, him just getting a feel for the program. He mentioned to Chad, actually, and Chad relayed it to me, that Will Muschamp basically contacted him in some way, like I think basically every day, that he's heard from South Carolina every day since he got the offer, and that Will Muschamp's personal recruiting touch, and the fact that he said he knows like 9 coaches at South Carolina. So just the fact that they not only have their head coach so involved, but they sort of, we call it team recruiting, which is a sense of your entire recruiting team, your entire coaching staff is building a relationship with the kid, as opposed to just their position coach or just their area coach. So I think all those things helped South Carolina be able to pass Georgia Tech, and I think play in the SEC, and just the status of the program, even though they had the disappointing year last year, just the facilities, the sort of SEC backing, all those things. I think he took that visit and realized that it was a much more, I would say, football oriented school than he was probably witnessing at Georgia Tech.
And that's why it's so important to get these guys on campus, early. Not that this February isn't really quote unquote an early visit for a 2021 guy, but getting in on them early, which South Carolina certainly did here. They've had some type of traction with Tatum for quite a while, since the staff offered, and then getting them in as many times as you can. And so you're right, that February junior day or weekend for them was significant, because, obviously even more so now since things are shut down, they were able to have some guys on campus and gain some traction that they're able to carry over. And that's going to be the case for some of the guys that have committed, like Tatum, or maybe some guys that if they can get them some other targets, if they can get them to hold through the summer and into the actual football season, that they need to wait, because they need to, have some guys see how they do this season on the field. need to stabilize things. A lot of guys out there that like South Carolina, that like the staff, that have had positive experiences, but they do want to wait and see that. So I think it's great for South Carolina that they've been able to get guys like Colton Gauthier and Nick Barrett and Bryce Steele and Trenilyas Tatum with everything that's happened. Certainly a positive that they've gotten some positive traction on the trail. Are they red hot? No. But I think they've done probably better than we anticipated going into this, just to look at it big picture.
Yeah, they really have. And I was thinking about that. I think they actually have been able to build a bit of momentum, man, which when you look at all the off the field stuff as far as coronavirus stuff that's just out of their control, and the season 4-8, all the off the field stuff as far as your president sort of something. We don't have to go all the way back into that, but just that they've dealt with a lot, I think. So, and some, that's they can take blame for, and some that's completely out of their control. So to come back and sort of be able to put together you can start to see the structure of what this class is going to be, I think right now, which, maybe even a couple months ago, we maybe weren't quite sure exactly what it was going to look like yet. So they're selling the vision, selling the program to these kids. And so far it's working. A really good pairing, I think, like I said, with Bryce Steele and now Trenilyas Tatum committed to South Carolina. And this is a kid, he's going to continue to blow up, man. Chad talked about the fact that Chad Simmons, our for those who don't really follow our stuff. By the way, if you don't really follow our stuff, right now we've got a free trial going on that gets you free, complete access from now until August, absolutely free. That's on the front page if you go to GamecockCentral.com. If you click to the link specifically for that, it'll automatically put the promotional code in there. But if for some reason it doesn't, it's just Gamecocks 2020. So you'll get this complete coverage. But one thing that we pointed out in that coverage was that, Chad Simmons, Chris, was there to watch Stevenson High play earlier this year. And Trenilyas Tatum and his team were playing Stevenson. And Stevenson is a program that just is a perennial power as far as putting out prospects. South Carolina, this is where Mike Davis 2.0, came from. South Carolina has traditionally landed guys from Stevenson High, and they've traditionally put out guys all over the SEC. Well, Chad was there to watch Stevenson play. They've got, of course, their 5 or 6 normal FBS guys. And he's like, who is this linebacker? Who is this dude? Sees him in pregame. He looks the part. And then the game starts, and the kid has 12, 13, whatever tackles, 2 sacks, is the best player on the field. And at the time, the kid hadn't really done the camp circuit at all, didn't hit camps before this last season. This was September of his junior year. Well, Chad puts out a tweet or whatever and says, hey, watch out for this dude. He looks the part. Georgia Tech evaluates him, hops in on him, and goes just all in on recruiting him. Then after the season, the junior film gets out, and then November, December, he just blows up. He had 12 offers in December alone. Now he has 20, 25 plus offers right now from some major schools. I would still say a bit under recruited. A Georgia or an Auburn or an Alabama or a Florida hasn't, or those guys haven't quite hopped in yet. But I think it's a pretty cool story, sort of how it played out. And this is a guy that still, he's probably not underrated. I think Chad has him well rated as a 4-star guy, but Chad's point is that he's a bit undervalued right now in the recruiting world, I think, and that this kid probably doesn't quite know just how good he is yet. I think, and I'm about to flip the film on that you can talk over top of it, Chris, but the kid I think is probably just, like you talked about, he's got upside. I think a lot of what he's doing right now is just that he's a natural athlete and has natural instincts. And he's probably a bit surprised that all this is happening. And I think he's still just kind of new to the recruiting process and everything that's going on around him.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another reason why the word, just raw comes to mind. I mean, whether it's in, you know, it's maybe reflected a little bit in that offer list, and that he's got some really quality offers. He's got a bunch of them, but some people have said, where are the heavy hitters, um, and this just looks like a pretty good evaluation by South Carolina, and a guy that maybe for a variety of reasons just hasn't picked up a ton of tractions among schools, and that sometimes happens. I mean, not that Tatum's going to be as good as Sky Moore, but I mean, Sky Moore couldn't even he was in Fort Lauderdale and couldn't even get a Miami offer until the night before signing day. It's not like Miami's been a bunch of world beaters lately either, and so he was committed to Rutgers at one time. So the point is, and Sky was a 4-star guy. You don't. It's not always reflected in your offer list. A lot of times it is, but not always. But if you look at Tatum, the thing that really stands out is he doesn't take a lot of false steps. He is always around the football. I mean, he's a tackling machine. They play against a lot of teams that are also sort of run heavy, so there's typically a lot going on at the line of scrimmage, and he's able to pretty quickly sort through that. He times up his blitz as well. He can avoid blocks. He's a pretty savvy football player in that regard. And you see, I mean, he's not you know, laying super heavy licks on guys, but he's a sure tackler, and he's always at the ball. You don't see him getting caught out of position a lot or having to take false steps and chase things down. He's really instinctive in that regard, playing in the box.
Yeah, there's one play on here that I noticed, and I'm hoping it's coming up where he sniffs out the screen and and isn't fooled at all, and makes a great play on the running back. But that was something that I was very happy to see, because you look at most of these clips, and he's allowed to be very aggressive in this scheme. He's allowed to sort of attack the line of scrimmage. Even when he's not blitzing per se, he's very aggressive and just hitting the hole and sort of trying to get into the backfield. And as you look at a lot of these, like you said, you look at a lot of these offenses, you're seeing a lot of zone read and option type stuff, and not a lot of spread. You're not seeing them drop back into coverage a whole lot. So so that's something that I think he'll have to develop in that area. But every prospect has areas they have to sort of work on and stuff with their skill set. But I think, like I said earlier, man, you look at Bryce Still and you look at his film. He's out there, covering a guy in the slot sometimes, carrying the running back on the wheel route, playing in space, playing in coverage. And, I think once you get these two guys on the field together, I think you can just sort of scheme it up where you can use the skill set of one guy to and sort of match the defense with each of these guys. So I think there's a lot to like about him. I think, dude, you look, he already has a really nice frame and really good linebacker size. He'll add to that, I think, but he's got the height. He's got obviously he's a physical kid, toughness, gets off blocks. And, this is a school, man, that just hasn't put out guys in the last decade or so. So he is still a little bit hidden, but I imagine, I mean, if you're South Carolina, I don't really think you're worried about how many other people haven't offered, or I don't think you're worried about the eval at all. I think it's a great evaluation. I think the big thing to watch with Tatum, dude, frankly, is just going to be, do the other schools come in and offer him later on? Does Georgia step in and offer? Does an Auburn step in and offer? And then what does that do to his recruitment? I don't really have any concerns watching him about him as a player. I think the biggest thing for his recruitment is just going to be how much does this thing blow up down the road? And that's obviously something that here you see another, true flex bone type offense, triple option offense that he's playing against. But yeah, Chris, to me, how much does this kid blow up? Because I think there's certainly the potential for that offer list to keep growing.
Yeah, and is this that screen? Yep, this is it right here but yeah, I mean, that is a question. We see that a lot. Sometimes it happens early where, South Carolina's not always first on guys, but I think they do a good job of getting in early on some guys. And I think there's multiple reasons for that. But, we've seen that story before where South Carolina offers a guy and then the guy ends up blowing up. I mean, heck, it happened with a couple offensive linemen in the last class. Remember Isaiah Walker and Javion Cohen, and those guys ended up signing with Florida and Alabama, respectively. And Carolina had him committed at one time. But I mean, even after a guy commits, sometimes a guy committing is just sort of the start, because then people go, okay, well, South Carolina took this guy, and maybe we need to take another look. Are we missing something? And so that could certainly happen. I imagine there's going to be some coaches, especially holed up right now in quarantine, reevaluating their board continuously and talking to other high school coaches and, sort of doing a little opposition research. And so that could certainly happen. But again, you watch this film, there's a lot to like, with what Tatum brings to the field. And so for now, until further notice, this is just something that I think South Carolina could hang their hat on and be quite happy about in terms of adding another good prospect to the list.
Well, man, if you're Rod Wilson, you got to be pretty happy about what you're sort of taking over. You inherit some pretty good players. Ernest Jones, I think, is ready to take another step. We saw him take a step last year, but maybe takes another step this year. We talked about Motaba. Try Green had a good year last year. You got Jamar Brown, who had a good, solid freshman year. But, now you add these two guys with a chance to add more. There's going to be a lot to work with for a young coach in Rod Wilson, who, I believe we're all very high on him, but he's going to have a lot of talent to work with. Chris, we also teased we're going to talk a bit about the potential changes in name, image, and likeness from the NCAA. Frankly, with us sort of focused on the recruiting stuff, I haven't read through all this stuff as much as I plan to and want to. I don't know how much you have read or sort of focused on it, but what are your initial thoughts on the potential changes to allowing, and this basically would allow for college football players to now benefit financially from their name, image, and likeness, which, of course, before by NCAA rule was not allowed?
Well, I think this was just a long time coming. It was almost something that just probably the NCAA finally threw up her hands and realized they weren't going to be able to stop it. This has been years and years of conversation on this to where, some smaller things that have built over time. We've seen athletes, sue over, their likeness being used in a video game, for instance, and things like that. And that's led to, we haven't had any NCAA football game in quite a while, but a lot of people are looking around, and especially when those voices get louder and louder, and there's just so much information now and so many opportunities for athletes to monetize themselves. Look, these aren't professional athletes, they're amateurs, but just the feeling is there's a whole market for monetizing athletes. I mean, it's huge. And they make a lot of money for schools. I mean, athletic departments bring in a ton of money, and it's driven by the athletes. That's who people tune in to watch. The coaches are well known, but people tune in to watch the athletes, to watch their favorite teams. And so with it being a $1 billion industry, people think that athletes should get a piece of the pie. And not that that's direct payment, but people are going, they should be able to, get some name, image, and likeness with some contingencies. And so it's finally gotten to that point to where now they're bringing that forth. And Wes, what I have seen is there's a lot of guardrails or regulations put in there. Because I think people maybe on the outside look at it and go, oh boy, now this is just going to be the wild, wild west. There's going to be boosters funneling. I'm not really sure. It'll be interesting to see if that increases more than it already does now. I think, some of for instance, there's a guardrail or regulation that, hey, booster companies, are not going to be able to directly pay athletes to do an endorsement or whatever. Now, are there ways around that behind the scenes? I'm sure. But it's not opening it up to be the wild, wild west. It's just giving athletes the opportunity to use their name, image, likeness to get a piece of the pie, to get some marketing dollars. So I think it's really interesting. I'm very curious to see how it plays out, how it affects recruiting, even if it's in an indirect fashion.
Do you have a feel right now for for what that is going to look like, as far as you said, barriers, what's going to be in place. I mean, does that mean a limitation on a financial, like a monetary amount, or a limitation on how many, different advertisements that a kid can do, exactly what it can look like? I know one of the things I believe I've seen is that, like, let's say Ryan Helinski, for example.
Mhm.
It can't be South Carolina Gamecocks quarterback Ryan Helinski. I believe it has to just be, hey, here's Ryan Helinski. Now any Gamecock fan knows he's South Carolina's quarterback, but
Right.
if let's say Wes and Chris's Honda dealership wants to do a commercial with Ryan Helinski, now do we have to have that approved by the NCAA? Does it have to go through school compliance, or do we call up Ryan Helinski and say, hey, we want to put you in a car commercial. This is how much it's worth to us. I mean, how much of a limitation will they seek to try to put on all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of different things. So the school can't be involved in it. So, a school during the recruiting process would not be, at least legally, allowed to say, yeah, we're going to get you all these endorsements. We're going to facilitate all these endorsements. Now, can schools say, I don't know, maybe, heck, man, maybe a school like Rutgers with proximity to New York, hey, man, we're in New York. Like we're near New York, but look at all these media opportunities. I mean, maybe it's something they can use like that indirectly, but basically the schools can't be directly involved in it. You're right that the athletes and the third parties, so our Honda dealership would not be able to say, hey, we're here with South Carolina quarterback Ryan Helinski, apparently, from the way I read it. So that part about the logo or the trademark, maybe you could say the school, but the logo or trademark, you can't use it. The schools can't be involved in it directly. Apparently, there is no cap on what you can make as an athlete. So, if an athlete wanted to start a YouTube channel and the thing just went gangbusters, what I don't know if they're making jokes or they're doing how-to videos or whatever it may be, trick shots, whatever it may be, if it blows up, apparently, there's no cap on the earnings. So there's a lot of different things. I mean, they want to limit maybe the types of endorsements. They want to make sure that everything is regulated. So there would be some kind of process, I would assume, how, they would have to check it with NCAA compliance or maybe school compliance. They have to make sure, okay, now you're going to get into these marketing agencies are going to want to get involved with the athletes. So you have to keep those in check. So it's going to create, I think, a big workload in some regard. And it is going to be interesting to see how much they can, regulate it going forward.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. I kind of lost my train of thought because dude, there's a lot to this thing and what it could mean for, and frankly, some kids are going to be very marketable in it, but I don't think it's going to be a situation where all 100 guys, I'm talking 85 scholarships and then walk-ons and stuff. Everybody on the team is, the dealership isn't calling all these guys wanting, to throw them some money to come do an advertisement. But the big, the guys that are front and center, the glamour positions, it absolutely will be a new source of income for these guys. So I'm curious to see how all this will work. The big thing and the most disappointing part about all of it, and I'm happy for the kids, man. I think it's an opportunity for the for the kids to get some compensation for what they're doing, but without the schools and the NCAA having to pay them, so they can still pretend that they're amateurs, I think. But so all right, here's the thing. You mentioned Rutgers, but dude, if I'm South Carolina, this is an advantage because you may not be able to directly point businesses to them, but if you look around the SEC, a lot of major college football programs are at schools that are in, quote, college towns. If you are South Carolina, you're dead in the middle of the state, you're in the state capital, Columbia may not be New York or Atlanta, but Columbia has, I think, an advantage. It's been perceived for years, I believe, as a disadvantage in some ways that South Carolina doesn't have a smaller college town feel being in the middle of Columbia. I think long term, the opportunities for kids at South Carolina, if they really think about it, as far as the number of businesses that will be around them, the number of businesses that like to connect with the South Carolina fan base that are Gamecock fans themselves or just want to, get in on that piece of the pie and get Gamecock fans to their business. There's going to be a much higher number of those schools or of those businesses, I should say, than there are at a school like Clemson, for example. So I think there maybe is a built-in advantage here for South Carolina, even though they can't directly take advantage of it. You can recruit to that. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what local businesses here in Columbia jump at the chance to go out and support these guys.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point to think about, and even more so that if South Carolina can find some success, because obviously, when you start thinking about, even local businesses, but then regional and then national. So, you mentioned Clemson right now. I mean, they could still probably do well in local. Do they have the amount of local businesses there in that town? No, but they could also probably reach into, the Columbia market, for example. There's a lot of Clemson fans. But nationally, they have a guy like Trevor Lawrence. Well, why is he such a national name? It's because he's Trevor Lawrence. And he also plays for a really good team who's, won a national championship. But it's because he's Trevor Lawrence. You know what I'm saying? So the point I'm trying to make is Jadeveon Clowney, if he was around on those good South Carolina teams for this current thing, he would be a guy that could command local, regional, and national because he's Jadeveon Clowney, and he's going to be eventually be the number one pick in the draft and former 5-star. Locally, he's a South Carolina kid who's a big time player, future NFL player, playing for the home state team. So, but then you look at regionally, nationally, how big of a name he is, how dominant of a player he is, and that helps you with those. So it's really interesting. And I'm interested to see, like you said, there's a lot of athletes to go around. How many people are going to dip into this market? Is, I don't know, Lexus or something, for example, going to say, instead of McConaughey doing his thing, or who is he? No, he's Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Lincoln might say, instead of putting McConaughey, let's put Trevor Lawrence in our car or something like that. I mean, are they going to do that on a national scale? Or is that, I think those are more the questions I have. How many, how much? The local stuff. Yeah, I feel like when this hits, we're going to be able to turn on the news, whatever town you're in, and you're probably going to catch on TV, or if you log on to your website, some local websites, you're probably going to see a decent amount of athletes, on those things. And then, how much do athletes do on their own? Do they start their own websites? Do they start, their own YouTube channels? There's a lot of possibilities out there with it.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I mean, there may be some opportunities for Gamecock Central and folks to talk about us a little bit and promote us a little bit. So I don't know how that part's going to work, but I'm intrigued by it. I'll tell you that. Let's hit a couple of questions here before we go. We'll let everybody get out of here. More stuff going on later on, by the way. 3:00 this afternoon, Des Kitchings, new running backs coach, will be on a Zoom call with the South Carolina media for the first time. So that'll be some more content that we'll have to bring to you both this afternoon and probably, towards the end of the week. We'll have plenty of stuff on that. Nathan Peterman has a question on YouTube. And let's see. Excuse me. Nathan Peterman is the GOAT. Says, does Daquan Stewart commit back to South Carolina? My guess would be no, that's probably run its course. I haven't heard any mention of that really being a possibility. Let's see. We got one more, Chris. This is Sam on our Insiders Forum. By the way, again, we have a great deal going on, free until August. Use the code Gamecocks 2020 on the front page of Gamecock Central. But Sam, who is SH Gamecock 2001, Chris says, tell me about Jordan Poole and also what has changed in Muschamp's 3 to 4 state recruiting philosophy it seems that Carolina is more aggressive now across 6 to 7 states.
Yeah, so Jordan Poole, I mean, he's a guy that South Carolina has actually known about him and been recruiting him for a while. I remember we saw him in camp last summer. He was another pretty good looking kid. He sort of reminded me a little bit of Bryce Steele as far as how he was built, maybe not quite as big, but he played running back and linebacker in high school. Most of his offers are for linebacker. And Des Kitchings has actually taken over his recruiting area. So Des, interestingly, wasn't super involved in his recruitment at NC State and Poole's recruitment, but they've sort of connected now that he's gotten to Carolina, and Will Muschamp's been in contact and the rest of the staff. So Kyle Krantz, I think, is on the case there too. So he's someone that I think would probably project a visit, take an official visit once recruiting opens back up. And he's someone that the staff seems to like a lot. I mean, as far as the 3 to 4 state philosophy, I mean, Muschamp is going to, keep that sort of 5-hour radius. That is what you want to hit the most: Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, part of Florida, and spot recruit the other areas. But I think in this recruiting class, a few different things. Number one, the amount of in-state offers isn't super high. There's going to end up being 5 or 6 guys in state probably for South Carolina that the staff wants. North Carolina is a battleground state this year. You're not going to go and sign 5 to 10 kids from Miami every year. You're not going to go, they prioritized Alabama a little bit more. They're always going to be in Georgia. So, they've gotten some guys that, even you look at Bryce Steele, he's from Virginia, but he's from Raleigh, really, from Ravenscroft, where he played before. So he's more of a North Carolina guy than Virginia. Nick Barrett's on the East Coast of North Carolina. South Carolina's recruited there before. Sam Reynolds from Alabama. They'll spot recruit there. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the class plays out. I don't think it's a dramatic departure from what they've done. They've just expanded the footprint. But maybe they'll expand it a little bit more this cycle for a few reasons, but maybe not dramatically.
Yeah, and I think some of it is just, with the in-state crop being not quite as strong this year, South Carolina, we knew was going to have to focus on out-of-state guys a little bit more. Also, I think the facilities and the upgrades they've made on campus just gives them a little bit more juice when they are able to get these guys on campus. You got to get them in. You got to let them actually experience it. But once you do, I think guys are like, okay, this is a lot better than I expected. I didn't know South Carolina had this. So if you keep getting in-state guys in, and then, it all sort of, snowballs for you too in a positive way, in that if you land one guy from an area, then he talks you up to maybe his buddy down the street. And then, you look at them being involved with Greg Penn, the 4-star linebacker from DeMatha. You land Marshawn Lloyd one year, and then next thing you know, this guy's on your campus hanging out with Marshawn and, likes what he sees. So I think it's always about just continuing to try to get as many of these guys on your campus, and then you sort of let it see how it falls, and you keep prioritizing different guys depending on where you shuffle them on your board. But for the most part, the more out-of-state guys you get in, they check out facilities, then obviously the better chance you're going to have to get some of those guys. And when those slots aren't taken by in-state guys, I think this is what you see. And it's been a combination, man. Some of these guys are your 4-star types. Colton Gauthier, of course, Tatum today, 4-star kids. And some of your guys are more evaluation. Sam Reynolds in Alabama, where you're trusting your eval and saying, we feel good about this and we like the kid and we're going to take him, even though he's not a big name guy like that. But yeah, I think that's going to about do it for the show. But Chris, I've been telling them all about it, so I'll let you tell them about it here. We've had a bunch of great content on Gamecock Central, I would say, the last week. Not to toot our own horns or anything, but I think we've had good stuff. Hopefully our readers do as well. And right now, if you're a YouTuber or you're on our social media but you haven't made the plunge yet, then certainly this is a time to do it.
It is. And, we got a free trial until the beginning of August now. If you go to our front page at Gamecock Central, there's a content item there that's got a Gamecock flag with our promo code Gamecocks 2020. You can click on that and get all the details. But if you find yourself, signing up in any form or fashion, just make sure you have Gamecocks 2020, the promo code, in there, and you get the insider content free until the beginning of August. So it's going to carry you through the summer. We know there's no sports going on, but our content, we've had plenty of it from recruiting. We've still got a lot of team stuff going up, a lot of interesting stuff. You can ask myself or Wes a question, or Colin Taylor if you have hoops or basketball questions on the Insiders Forum at any time, discuss with other Gamecock fans. And you can try it out until August. You say, well, I don't know if I want to pay. Try it out, see what you think. And we think you'll probably stick with us. We hope you will. And we appreciate all the folks that have jumped in so far. There've been a lot of them so far that are checking out our content.
Oh yeah. And we want to be the show of the people. So I know we said we're done, but we do have one more final question from Adam Fox on YouTube. So anytime we do these, if y'all put your questions in the chat, either on YouTube or Facebook, we will certainly try to get to all those. And he wants to know, how does the Des Kitchings hire affect Lavoisier Carroll's recruitment? I would say not much, honestly. I think you look at Lavoisier, his decommitment from South Carolina, and then, of course, he's committed to Georgia now. Being a Georgia kid, I think having the opportunity to go play a glamour position like, running back at Georgia, I think went a long way with Lavoisier. If you're South Carolina right now, I think the focus at running back, certainly this isn't all the guys, but I think your focus is certainly some of the same guys that they were focused on before Des Kitchings was hired. I think you look, of course, at Tyon Evans, who's originally from Hartsville and is at junior college right now. I think they're still in great shape with him. You look at Travion Cooley, a kid out of North Carolina they were in really good shape with. We'll see how that one plays out. He was not able to visit. The long story short there is that he was not able to visit before recruiting was shut down and everybody was quarantined. So that hurt South Carolina quite a bit there, but we'll see how that plays out. And Jalen White's a kid from Alabama that they're in on at running back that I think is one to at least keep an eye on. And they just, Chris, do you know the name off the top of your head, the running back they just offered that's committed to Tennessee?
Jalen Wright.
That's it. Jalen Wright.
Carolina, the fast running back. Yep. Yeah.
So that's one. I don't know. I talked to one of his coaches or one of his, I think it's like a 7-on-7 coach deal. I talked to his coach and he, they're kind of mum right now about whether he's still considering other schools or not, or whether it's just Tennessee. But generally in those situations, I sort of feel like if you offer a kid, there's probably a reason. So I think South Carolina's maybe been given some reason to think that they have a chance with the kids. So you don't just waste your time, obviously, offering guys you have no shot with if they're committed to other schools. So he may be a name to keep an eye on. We're trying to still gather some information on his recruitment and what's going on there. But like we said, we got a lot of great content. Adam, we appreciate the question. Hopefully everybody will check us out and keep checking us out here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on the podcast, audio only, hit rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We appreciate y'all tuning in. To answer your question, Adam, I doubt it's more personal opinion, but I don't see South Carolina necessarily being a long time factor with Lavoisier Carroll moving forward. So for Chris Clark, I'm Wes Mitchell. Everybody have a good one, and we'll talk to you next week.